Hi friends, I'm Jeannie Quinn, and this is the demo part of my contribution to the XYZ Symposium and exhibition, and I'm delighted to be a part of it. I want to thank Matt Karras for organizing the demonstrations and Amelie Prue for inviting me to be in the exhibition, and all of the other wonderful people who have helped make this possible. So thank you. I'm sitting here at my kitchen table, and I feel like that might be the most important part of my demonstration. Is I started to learn a little bit about digital fabrication probably about, I haven't counted, maybe 14 years ago, something like that. I was invited to be part of a group called Fabricating Ideas. That was a group of artists, all of whom had experience with digital fabrication. I had none, but was interested and happy to be asked. And what ended up being maybe the most important thing about it was that it allowed me to have a studio that was portable. And I didn't know how important that would be at the time, but I became a mom 10 years ago. And I couldn't just go to my studio all the time or live in my studio the way that I had previously. And so it became an incredible gift to have the ability to make things that were three-dimensional at my kitchen table. And I had never really seriously worked at home as a studio practice. I had always really confined that to the studio and just spent all of my time in the studio. And so learning how to draw, I use Rhino 3D. Learning how to draw in Rhino allowed me to really make big works, bigger than I had ever made before, large installations, public art projects, and to be able to work from home. So it gave me an incredible flexibility in terms of space, and also as far as materials. I realized that I could make a drawing and I could turn that into a print on a piece of fabric or something that was water jet cut out of colored resin, or use it to make paper templates that I would then make things out of clay. I've done all of those things. I've made wireframe drawings that I then turned into wire that was handmade. I've done vinyl cuts, all kinds of things. And I have sometimes used the same drawings repeatedly at different scales, with different colors, with different materials. So creating a digital drawing felt like having money in the bank. It's like having this thing that I can use and manipulate in lots of ways. So I am not a genius at digital drawing or digital fabrication. There are other people in this show who are much better at this than I am. But I feel like the thing that I'm good at is figuring out just how to use it as a tool, even in kind of basic ways. So I'm going to show you how I draw. And I always start with material that comes from somewhere. I'm looking at a piece of lace, or I'm looking at a tree branch. It's usually something from the history of decorative arts. And then I sometimes take something flat and turn it into something dimensional, or manipulate it in different ways. So first I'm going to start out with just a little drawing that I made, actually, that just looks like something I would draw, and show you how I made it dimensional. And this is a technique that I used for a show that I made, a piece that I made for a show at the Denver Art Museum. So I'm going to cut over to sharing my screen. And here we are in Rhino. So this is just a little line drawing that I made that looks kind of like a decorative element. And there are, of course, a million ways in Rhino that I could turn this into a dimensional object. I could take this and I could extrude it in space. I could, I could draw little arcs over it and drape something over it. There's so many ways to do things, but this is after experimenting with lots of different ways. This is a way that I came up with that I liked what it looked like in the end. And depending on how you decide to make something dimensional, it will, there's some ways that you can do it that it actually looks kind of similar. But there will be subtle differences in how smooth the object is or what the transitions look like, different kinds of things. So I'm just going to show you this way that I developed and that I used to make branches for a porcelain chandelier. So on this drawing, I went ahead and made dots for myself just to indicate where I would decide to create almost kind of like a skeleton for the piece. Normally I wouldn't do this, I would just eyeball it, but since I'm doing a demo, I decided to prep a little bit. So I'm going to zoom in. And I'm going to start off just by looking at my line here that I'm going to turn into a sort of bone-like branch or something along those lines. And wherever the line gets thick or thin, I'm going to mark that with a line that just goes across the object. And I'm going to change my settings so that it attaches to a point. Okay, so it's going to attach to the point, and I'm just going to go across. Across. And I'm going to go right to that place where there's a, do you see how there's a, you know, I should check intersection as well. There we go. So since there's a kind of a joint right there in my line, I want to make sure that I go there because then I'm going to get that. It's going to be kind of marked on my three-dimensional piece. Okay, I'm going to go across like this. There we go, la la la. And I lean it a little bit to make it, I mean, it depends. I'm going to make it sort of roughly perpendicular to the, you see, I'm making it kind of roughly perpendicular here to the line instead of, you know, leaning it way this way or way that way. It depends on where it is in the piece. And all of these little decisions will affect the way that the final object looks. Now you see, since I have again, I have a point here at the top. I'm doing two lines there. And here I'm going to go sort of parallel with this other line, stretch it out a little bit. So these will all subtly affect the way the final piece looks. And that's the kind of thing you just learn from experimenting. Okay, now I'm going to shrink it down a little because I can see there's more space here at the end. I'm going to go here and then again here. Okay. Let me check end just so I get it right there at the end. Okay. So just to show you different points of view, there I am from the top. Let's get the perspective view. Okay, so I've just got this flat drawing with these lines that go across it, okay? Now what I'm going to do is add circles that fit the dimension of each of these lines so that I'm making an object that's it will have the profile of this drawing that I've made, but it will become bilaterally symmetrical, which is always important to my work. And will sort of hug the profile. So how do I do that? I'm going to choose the circle tool, and I'm going to do a 2-point circle. And I'm going to start here at the end, and I'm going to make a circle. And this is a flat circle, which I'm then going to rotate and tilt up. Let's see. Oops, that's not the way I want to do it. Let me do that. Okay, sorry, I don't need to do it with this one. All right, and I actually like them if they're just ever so slightly off of, you know, if I like a little bit of imprecision. I like to kind of draw things in a way that shows my hand has been involved in the drawing, that everything isn't exactly done by the computer, essentially. So you'll notice that I rotated that by hand as opposed to like clicking it and telling it to rotate 90 degrees. I like these little wobbles in the line like you would get if you were actually drawing something by hand. So you can see that I've got it there, it's tilted up, but it's also tilted a little bit off axis here. So I now need to, let's see, I need to move this so that it's attached at this point up here. And then I'm going to rotate it from here into here, click it out. Okay, so now it's right where I want it to be on the end. Now I'm going to take that circle and I'm going to copy it. So I'll just copy it a few times. So I actually want one. Let's see. Actually, no. Let's see. I'm going to copy it. Let's copy it from down here. Go ahead and get those going. All right. So this one, I'm first going to rotate it from down here, from the end, go up to here, rotate it. Now I need to scale it. It's pretty darn close, but I'm gonna, you know what, let me zoom in on this so you can see it a little more clearly. And I can see it a little more clearly what's going on. So there's my circle. You can see it doesn't quite go to the end right there. So I'm going to scale it. So it goes from here to here, and then I'm going to pull it to the end. Okay. Now I'll take this circle. I'm going to do the same thing. I choose the rotate, go from the end. Actually, I'm just going to go to here, line it up with my line. Now I'm going to scale it. So I'm going to start at the end, go to this end, fit it down. No. Let me do that again. Get it, and to here. Come on. There we go. All right. And same thing here, choosing the circle, rotating it. So starting at the end here, going up to the top. Oops, sorry. Yeah. And then rotating it to line up. Now I'm going to scale it from one end of the circle to the other end of the circle and down. Now there's multiple ways I could do this part of the drawing. This is the way I do it. There's probably faster ways. I'm never good at figuring out the fastest way to do things in Rhino, but let's look and let's make sure. Yeah, so this is all going the way that I want it to. Sometimes drawing in 3 dimensions on a 2-dimensional surface, you can kind of lose your way. But so you can see that I'm starting to get all of these circles that line up. So I'm gonna go ahead and do the rest of these, but I won't make you watch me do all of that. So I'll pause the recording here for a moment. Here you can see I've drawn all the circles that correspond to this outside shape. And I'm now going to loft those circles together, and the command says select the curves to loft. I'm going to start at the very end here and choose all the circles. It's important that I choose them all from the same side. If I go clicking all over the place like this, if I jump around, that will change the way that the order or direction in which the loft command works. So I want to do it all from the same side. I've chosen all of my circles there, and I hit return. And it allows me to drag the scene point to adjust. I typically just make sure that I'm careful to click all on the same side and then do the loft command, and it works. If it doesn't, then I play around with it and try adjusting the seam or doing something different, but it usually works. So then I hit return. It gives me various choices, but I just say loft, and voila, there I have now a three-dimensional object that has the same silhouette as I originally drew. And it looks kind of like a toothbrush, but it also looks like a decorative object. So I could imagine using this in a variety of ways. All right, that's the demo for the three-dimensional drawing. I wanted to show you a few pieces that I've made where I've started with the drawing in Rhino 3D. So this is a piece called You Are the Palace, You Are the Forest. And the branches here are drawn using just the technique that I showed you in Rhino. So this is sort of a side view and just a detail of a branch there. And then you can see, of course, how much things change after they're cast in porcelain and glazed. I suspended these branches in the kiln so that I could have glaze drips coming off of the branches. And this is a faceted piece that I designed in Rhino and hung upside down in the kiln so that I would have drips that go up. This is another piece that I drew in Rhino and then just used the drawings as paper patterns. I printed them out and used them as patterns to hand build pieces off of. This was for the Korean Ceramic Biennale in 2013. And this is a piece where I really used the inspiration of the wireframe drawing in Rhino and kind of recreated that wireframe using cut vinyl on the wall and pins and wire loops that are kind of stitched into the wall. So I was sort of recreating what a wireframe drawing looks like in wire, like hand making the digital drawing. And this is a more recent laser cut piece where I just I made a flat drawing of a piece of lace, a two-dimensional drawing in Rhino, and cut out the drawing on a laser cutter, leaving a little flap for each object that I drew. And then I folded the flaps up to make it dimensional. So on a technical level, this was incredibly simple. But just adding dimension again through handwork. So I really like combining the hand with the machine. So that just gives you a little sampling of some things that you can do that are really very simple in terms of digital drawing or fabrication, but then combining it with the hand to make something that's a little more complex. Thank you all so much for watching the video on the demo, and that's it for now. Thank you.